Welcome to Big Blend Radio with your hosts, Lisa and Nancy, editors of BigBlendMagazine.com.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Big Blend Radio's Toast to the Arts Show. We chat with artist Victoria Chick every third Saturday. We get into art history a lot. We talk about the museum, which is the Southwest Regional Museum of Art and Art Center. This is a project she's been working with, along with others who are all volunteering their time to get this project off the ground and get a building for it in Silver City, New Mexico, which is where Victoria is based. So you can check that project out if you go to swrm-art.org. And also Victoria's website is victoriachick.com, where you can see her work. But today she's talking about another artist, and this is going to be an artist a lot of people know about because of the famous Gothic painting, picture, I should say. It is the American Gothic is what it was called. And we're going to, the farmers, which they're with their pitchfork on the front, that's a very famous picture. But the artist is Grant Wood, and we're going to talk about him. We've touched on him before with another article and podcast we did with Victoria about agriculture and art. And about a few weeks ago, Nancy and I were in Makotica, Iowa. I think I can pronounce it. And lo and behold, we were on some scenic byway by a guy called Grant Wood. And we're like, why do we know this name? Well, lo and behold, Victoria knew who he was and reminded us just of how and why we know about him. So welcome back, Victoria. How are you doing?
Oh, thank you, Lisa. It's been a great day here so far, and I'm ready to talk about Grant Wood.
That's
really
so
neat.
funny. That's so funny.
Yeah.
We were there. I was like, we know that name. We know that name.
I know. Yeah, when you told me that that's where you and Nancy were staying for a while, I thought that really was really neat. But you told me that there was so much stuff about Grant Wood in the town, and I didn't know that.
And it's interesting because I think they have this scenic byway with him, and these towns are very small agricultural communities. So like if you've been to Central California, like Tulare County has these smaller historic downtowns, and there's modern stores and stuff, but the downtowns are so charming. But this one, Makotica, you know what I'm going to say, and I know I've said this before, the Midwest does art really well. Most of the communities we've been through have public art, even, the fancy bike racks we like. But they seem to be doing a lot in regards to environmental centers, nature centers, and they seem to use art in all of these places too. So they have that in Makotica. All of this is part of this scenic byway that connects in all these different towns. And downtown Makotica, they have an art center, like a theater, but they have this sculpture that is actually a gazebo, but it doesn't look like a gazebo, but it's like a shelter you could sit under for shade. And it represents the timber that was a big deal in that area, which I didn't realize. And they talk about how the trees are the fiber of people and how it all connects. So that's interesting. So I know we're going to be posting your article. Everyone will be able to read it up on blendradioandtv.com, but we'll add some photos from the scenic byway, because even when we were driving it, there's all these beautiful river areas. Makotica rivers, there's limestone. So lime mining was a big deal. And so there's all these limestone kilns out there too. It's fascinating stuff. Like we loved it. And so this trail goes through these different towns. They have a map with, where to eat, where to sleep, where to play, and then what has to do with art. And so, we spent one afternoon doing it all in the Makotica area. And of course, had to go hang out at the river and have a picnic and all of that. But seeing the pastures and these red barns, I did get I almost got run over. I had to park in a stupid place to go take a photo of the farmer's barn, and they probably go, oh, I see those license plates from Arizona. These are just barns out here, but seeing all those barns and everything, and just the way it's just so iconic. And so it does remind me of his art a lot, about that setting of, the farmlands. So, and I was going to say, Anamosa, Iowa, I believe is also on that trail. In fact, I think
Yes.
it was just the town over from where we were. So we were really close to
Okay.
him. Yeah. And then doesn't he go into Illinois with what he does too? Like some of his history goes into it, which is just over the border where we were. We were on the
Well,
border of Illinois.
yeah, he went for a while. He was at the Art Institute, studying early on, and then of course the Chicago Art Institute is the location and the institution that really gave him his big boost as an artist, because they're the ones that he entered American Gothic into a juried exhibition there, and it won first place. It got the medal, the big prize, and also the Art Institute bought the painting. So that was like gold for somebody's resume at the time, and it really launched him into a different level of being an artist.
So yeah, this is, that was a big deal, that picture.
Oh, very
Um,
much, yeah.
was it a painting first that he did it? Because I know he would, reading the article, again, everyone up on blendradio.tv.com, but also all the links are in the radio show notes, the podcast notes. But it seems like he was kind of a Renaissance man in a way. Like it wasn't just, painting, it was, interior design, it was woodwork. He seemed
Yeah.
to delve in to everything.
He did. He was involved in almost every endeavor in Iowa that was art related. I mean, he really was. You call him a Renaissance man, and that describes him really well, because he did metalwork. I mean, he did this wonderful chandelier out of metal that represented Iowa to him, and where the bulbs would fit into the chandelier. The holders for those bulbs were made to look like corn cobs. So it sounds a little hokey, but it really was a good design, and brought him a lot of kudos, I guess, at the time. But he did jewelry. One of the things he did when he went to Chicago for a short period of time to support himself while he was studying at the Art Institute, he worked in a silversmithing shop, and he learned very quickly. So didn't take him much time before he opened up his own business as a silversmith. And so he was there for a while in Illinois, in Chicago area. Back home, his mom was always kind of precarious, because I mean, you go back to when he lived in Anamosa. His father died. There's a pretty good sized family. His father died when he was only 10 years old, and so he had a brother that was slightly older. They moved off the farm and went into town because their mom thought there'd be more opportunity there, and she didn't think that, she and his sisters and he could handle heavy farm work, I guess. So they moved to town. Well, he had to get a job right away. I mean, he's 10 years old, for heaven's sake, and his older brother was probably about 12 or 13. So those two boys supported the family.
Wow.
And I mean, so I can't imagine people, kids this, today doing that. But these guys, I mean, they didn't have any choice. They just buckled down and they did what had to be done, and they didn't complain about it. But while he was doing that, he was still going to school, and he got involved in an amateur theater group in Cedar Rapids. He did a little bit of work. Really young. It probably wasn't interior decoration, but he was probably helping somebody do work like that. Anyway, so he overcame some difficulties as a child, even. And by the time he got to high school, he was very directed as to what he wanted to do. He knew he wanted to be an artist, and I think he tried a lot of different ways of working. He had teachers, and he worked for the teachers rather than, he didn't have his own style early on. I mean, when we say Grant Wood today, we sort of sort of know that it's going to be kind of a smooth surface, and the lines are going to be precise, the edges are going to be crisp, and the color is going to be really, really warm. But he took him a while to develop that style, and he really did not develop it until after he went to Europe, which is really interesting to me because he's working his way through life. You know, he earns money, and then he studies, and he earns money at the same time, and then he is able to afford a trip to Europe, and that was really beneficial for him. When he got there, that was really when he quit doing all the other stuff that was art related, and he buckled down and he studied painting. And he arrived in France when Impressionism was very popular. It finally gotten really popular. So he started his career painting and as an impressionist, which was way different than he wound up in his style. But he made actually 4 trips to Europe, mostly to France, but he went to Italy too. He went to Germany, and he spent a lot of time going to museums, and some of the things that he saw in museums, especially in Germany, were the Northern Flemish painting, Northern Renaissance it was called, from the 14th century and a little bit into the 15th century, and it was very, very smooth. The oil painting had just come in at that time, so the surface was glossy, the edges were very very defined, and within these paintings and some of the graphic work that he saw, there were Gothic elements, and he really, as we can see by American Gothic later on in his life, he was really struck by that kind of architecture. And when you go to Iowa and you go to some other places in the Midwest, southern Minnesota, Illinois, anyway, you see a lot of these farm buildings and these old houses, these old frame houses. They used a lot of Gothic architectural elements, like windows, that sort of look like we might call them church windows today, because that they have that pointed arch at the top that is typically Gothic style. So anyway, all those elements that he saw there, he brought them back to Iowa, and I think he always missed Iowa in a way. He said it was quoted as, I can't remember the exact quote, but basically it was that he had to go to Europe to find out that he wanted to be in Iowa.
That happens with travelers. You know what I mean? It's like, well, it doesn't also, like, kids are raised in smaller communities like that, and then they go off to the big city. It's like, I'm going to New York City. And then 5 years later, they're like, we're getting the hell out of New York City. You know, like New York City's for New York City people. Like there's a certain that's a, you know, it's like LA and places like that. You think you want to go there. And for a vast majority, it's their place. Right. But if it's not, like, you go, you know what? I really want that farmland. I want the prairie flowers. I want those birds, the red-winged blackbirds, you know? Yeah.
And
that's cool.
And then of course his family, they were a tight-knit family. I mean, with what they'd gone through and how they'd helped each other. And so I think he missed that also. Even though he took on a responsibility to support everybody in his family. His brother was gone by then, but he had a sister at home and his mom, and he continued to support them throughout his life.
I think that's amazing when families, you go through these rough patches in life, right? I don't think anybody's, you know, immune to them, and you have to, you know, pick it up and go for it and just grin and bear it and do it. And it teaches you these lessons. And I think artists always kind of pull from that. It becomes like a creative source. You know what I mean? It's like your
Right.
water well for art.
Yeah.
But he seemed
Well,
to be
the other thing,
inspired by things like that simplicity to me in his art, yet has so much movement and lighting is amazing. I think he's an amazing artist personally. I like his work.
well, yeah, I do too. He once he won that prize, I mean, the world opened up for him, and as from an artistic standpoint, and he was he was quite prolific for a while. Then he joined this. I mean, he lived during two world wars, so that affected him, even though he was safe in Iowa. Okay,
Mm.
so but in the 1930s, of course he'd gone through the Depression as well. So that Depression was hard for everybody. So everybody, it was kind of a shared experience. I mean, it wasn't a wonderful one, but people did help each other, and I think that was important to him from a personal standpoint. You had mentioned Stone City Quarries, and I want to mention that because I did not know about Stone City Quarries when I went through graduate school. I hadn't heard of them, but I found out later on when I was doing some research on lithography that World War I really interrupted the development of lithography because it was in Austria and part of Germany that the fighting was disrupted quarrying rock, and that area of Europe had the finest grained limestone ever that anybody knew about at the time. Well, when that supply of limestone couldn't make it to the United States anymore, they did discover in Iowa this quarry that had very similar rock, very similar granite or limestone that was really fine grained, and you could draw on it. So they started mining it, and they made buildings out of it. They did wonderful work. It was very high quality, but from an artistic standpoint, one of the benefits was they could cut blocks of the stone and smooth it out, and then people could draw on it, and you do lithography on it. So that when we see the artwork of the Depression era, and a little bit after that, from the artist standpoint, there did a lot of lithographs, and that was where that stone came from that allowed them to do it.
Wow, that's amazing. Because out in Makotica, they had the lime kiln, so I don't know if that kind of connects with him. And it was some historic town that went away after a while, but it developed a little community.
That's Stone City, and of course he along with some of the other regionalist artists like Thomas Hart Benton and John Stuart Curry, they formed an art colony, and they called it the Stone City Art Colony, which was pretty original since it was in Stone City. And it did not last long, but the buildings that formed the art colony were part of this very small town, and they still exist, although nobody lives there anymore. It's not a town. The art colony is not a town kind of setup anymore.
That's interesting, man. How it all comes together with him. So so he had a rough time as a kid, but the family was like tight.
Yeah,
as you say,
people treated him really well. I mean, he was a nice person. He did a lot for the community he lived in, and everybody treated him well. Well, things changed after he got to the University of Iowa. At first, he came in as a faculty member. He was very respected. In fact, one of the things I read said he was probably the most famous professor they had at the entire university. So I mean, they were really glad he was there. He'd been there a while when they got a new chairman of the art department, and that 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 guy. I don't know why he disliked Grant Wood at all. I mean, maybe he was just jealous because he wasn't as famous as Grant Wood, but he made Grant Wood's life miserable at the university because he was a backbiter and worked actively to ruin his reputation. From the art standpoint, and he wasn't satisfied with just trying to ruin his reputation at the university. He contacted art critics in New York and so forth, and he claimed that Grant Wood was a fascist or a communist or both.
Oh, wow.
He wasn't, he wasn't.
It was
very
that era
consistent.
though, wasn't it?
But-
It was kind of that era of people doing that.
Well, it was before McCarthy. The 50s were probably more like that, where there was blacklisting and stuff like that. But before that, I mean, people just, it was actually before. This is a period before World War II, it would be going into it, or maybe during it. So, because it lasted for quite a long time. But if any of your listeners have ever taken art history classes, maybe not right now, but maybe like 20 years ago, there was a book that was commonly used, and it was written by a guy named Jansen, Jansen. It was called the History of Art, and it was a basic textbook. Well, Jansen had been reached by this guy at the University of Iowa, and had been informed by him that how terrible Grant Wood was, and how his paintings were not worth anything. He was just provincial, and his work was passé. Anything that you could think that would be a negative comment. That's what this. So anyway, when this guy wrote his textbook, he pretty much bad-mouthed the regionalist artists. Thomas Hart Benton, he couldn't attack him too greatly, because by that time Thomas Hart Benton's picture had been on the cover of Time magazine as Man of the Year. But he would not put Grant Wood's name in his book. So,
oh my God!
If you're looking at the history of art that represents the regionalists, you won't find Grant Wood's name in Jansen's book. And
that's crazy.
It's very spiteful, and it's too bad. It's too bad that happened.
That happens in so many industries, like even the food industry. There was a documentary we covered on Charlie Trotter, and Charlie Trotter, it was one of the top chefs in, I think it was Chicago. I'm going to get in trouble. Yeah, Chicago. Went through hell, and he was like, Mr. Perfectionist, not always the nicest person, and then did a lot of good things though, like a lot of good charity stuff, really took care of people. And he, people used him basically. They learned from him, and then he would get pissy if they kind of stole from, like, not stole money or anything, but would try to rise over him. Kind of use his claim to help themselves, and he was all about the Michelin stars. Anyway, Charlie Trotter was one who innovated what fine dining was. Like, he was the king of it, king of farm to table. When it comes to farm to table, he had his own farms. He did all this stuff.
Yeah.
And he got put down, and then he got sick, and he did pass away, but he got put down at some kind of award thing. Somebody was there, and Anthony Bourdain went to this big event, and all the people, the muckety mucks, are there. And he just turned around and looked at each one of them and called them exactly what they needed to hear about themselves, about putting down the trailblazer. You don't put down the trailblazer. You can go ahead, and that's the trailblazer did something. Everything. He was like, there's nothing. You guys aren't there without him,
Right.
And they had forgotten that, and that's kind of what it sounds like with Grant Wood. Like, You know what I mean? They forget who he
Well, yeah,
is and
I
didn't want
think
to.
they were. It's interesting because they were tearing him down because he was. They were jealous, and he was admired, respected. His work was loved by most people. Um, about the time that he passed away, uh, the Second World War was not quite over. It was kind of like the middle of the war, and so there was. He was so upset. I don't think that did his health any good. Um,
Yeah.
you, you're worried about your country. You're worried about the war. You're worried because people are bad mouthing you, and all you're trying to do is express yourself in a visual art way. And I'm sure that being ridiculed, having your work ridiculed and so forth, was really very hard on him. And also, and the war during the Second World War, and immediately after that, there were a lot of artists that were trying to get out of Germany and out of France, and they were coming to the United States if they were able to, because there were repercussions on that too from the countries they were leaving. But at that time, then people started writing about expressionism, and expressionism started becoming popular because the critics were touting it. And and I mean, I'm not denigrating that, because things change, and so Grant Wood's paintings started to appear to be too insular, too American, too provincial, and all this exciting work was coming in from Europe, and people started paying more attention to that. And so Grant Wood, I mean, he died in 1942, so he didn't really. He saw what was happening. He may have been too close to it to realize it, but but after his death, I mean, his work was still appreciated, but not exalted like it had been. That style was kind of, and Thomas Hart Benton experienced the same thing for a while.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Wow.
And then there's kind of renaissance of where people reevaluate things that have been done, and art, like music and like certain kinds of writing, they go in trends. They sometimes a trend will die out pretty completely, but sometimes it bounces back, and we see that in fashion all the time, where a certain style will make a comeback.
Yep, like bell bottoms are back.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, it's the 70s again.
Yeah, why not? They're cool. I like them.
So,
They make my hips better.
Yeah. So I mean, life is interesting. I think most of his life he enjoyed. I really do. Even when he was young and had to move out of farm country and into the city. I think he had his family we loved. He painted many members of the family. They were his models many times. And I mean, we could talk completely about his relationship with his sister, but it would take another hour. So,
oh my God, because it seems that they were close, or
yes,
or
they
not.
were very close, and of course she got flack because of that painting. People were kid her, because she looked so kind of dowdy and mean and cranky in that painting. She wasn't like that at all in real life. So she got a lot of razzing, I guess, from from that experience. But and
Wow.
he felt bad. He felt bad about that because he wasn't really making it about her. She was just nice enough to stand as his model. So she
Wow.
didn't even really exactly look completely like that.
No,
But
it, it's, I think people are, we're just we're horrible people, like creatures, we are like we can be really nice. And then there's that split side, like, it's like
yeah,
one day you're the rock star, the next day you're down. And that happens in so many,
right, right,
spheres, right? It
yeah,
happens.
and
But people aren't perfect, but it's like they come down. But
yeah,
I think for artists and people of the creative nature, you're wearing your heart on your sleeve with everything you put out if you've got integrity
yeah,
to it, you still
right,
are, and you have to make that choice of I'm doing it for what that art needs to be, for the true creative spirit, not to match your furniture, you know. I think, but
I
then
think
he might have done a little of that because he was an interior designer. But I think that's because he understood simplicity and
yeah,
he understood lines and how to make
yeah,
straight lines feel like they
yeah.
flow. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
His,
He had a,
yes,
yeah, had
he had a
curvature.
very strong design sense, and in everything he did, But I kind of think that he had the last laugh, if you could call it that, as far as being put down, because his work is really appreciated today. I mean, he never really lost totally the admiration of general public. And critics, you sort of you have to sort of take what they say with a grain of salt, because they're not necessarily giving you truth. They're giving you opinion, and they're welcome to do that. That's what they're paid for. However, the guy Lester Longman, who was the instigator of the um, attack on Grant Wood, who's heard of him today? Except I just told you.
Hmm.
He was the chairman of the art department, and he was a mean man. So that's what we can say about him.
Yeah, exactly. Right. There you go.
Right.
Gosh. But I mean, Grant Wood lives on. I mean, he's got his own
Hmm.
byway. He's
Right.
famous. That, American
Yes.
Gothic is just, I mean, that's a huge deal. But I mean, he has his own byway and it
Yes.
connects communities and they do a really good job on signage. I have to say, Iowa as a whole does good on signs and byways. And even with the Jefferson Highway, we
Yes.
started following it in some parts of Iowa, and they really did it to the point of like, you need to turn left because even though this is a main street, the highway back in the day went around the corner. So you just go down around the
Yeah.
corner. You know what I mean? They embrace their roots and their heritage in such a good way. And I think that's important, when you go
Oh
to these
yes.
places. I love the Midwest. Honestly, I had no
Yeah.
clue. I had
You
no
know.
clue. And I don't know why it gets put down because it does. You know what I mean? Even as a destination, that's
No,
wrong.
Midwest. The Midwest is a great place, and it's got a lot of culture. It's got a lot of activity. It's got a lot of interesting things going through it. It's got history. It's also um, a home of people who they're not may not be overly effusive, but they are always friendly. If you want to talk to somebody in the Midwest, they'll be happy to spend time talking to you, and
Mm.
I appreciate that.
Uh-huh.
Um, one thing when I was looking at this, I realized that my father went to the same high school that Grant Wood went to,
Oh, wow.
because my father was born in Cedar Rapids, but he was there
No way.
probably about 10 years after Grant Wood.
Wow.
But
That's,
I can
those
remember when
connections are cool.
yeah, it
Yeah.
is. But I can remember when I was a little kid, my father talking about Grant Wood, and I would have been probably 9 or 10 years old. Um, and my father, even back then, Grant Wood was famous enough that my father, you know, knew about him and held him up as kind of an example, a good example.
That's amazing, though. When you think
Yeah.
about how close it is, the connection to you,
Mhm.
that here he was and he was building and growing. And I mean, it's just that's so cool to have those ties back, I mean,
Yes.
that's when I
Yeah.
couldn't believe it when we were there, like, I know that name. What's that name? And the lady was like, there was taking us around. She's a very sweet lady. And she's like, no, it's that one artist who did this. And I think it was Nancy who was like, oh, you mean Winslow Homer? I'm like, no, 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 it's not it. It's not. I know who it is. I got to call Victoria. Victoria, who, what, and where? We know this name. But yeah, it was just it's so nice to see communities celebrate their artists. And you know what we found on our way to Makotica? And now I can't
Mhm.
remember the town name, and I'm going to have to look it up where we were. So we had to get gas. Like we really needed to get gas. You know how it is
Yes.
on the road. All of a sudden,
Yes.
we need gas. We get gas and we go in. We're like, this town had this name. Yes, this is the home of Lily something, or I can't remember her name. I have to go back on all our notes. We're like, who is that? Millie. Because then we went and met a Millie from Silver City. We thought, ooh, who's this?
Oh,
But
you
we
you were
thought,
in Kansas City.
no, we weren't in Kansas City on this one. We were in
Yes.
it was somewhere in Iowa. Or maybe
Okay.
somewhere in Kansas. Turns out we were in the town where a young girl built and made Monopoly. She created Monopoly, and
Oh
she's from
my.
this town. And we're like, no way, we've got to find her house. But we were in a rush to get to, meet our friend over
Yeah.
in Makotica. So now we have to go back and find this and do history. Because I'm like, we're in Monopoly Town. I mean, so then I was trying to figure out, now I want to see the original game, what it looked like. They've got to have a museum somewhere to see, did she design it after like Kansas City, or you know what I mean? Where I've got to go to the beginning of it. So that's really cool. And I think it was a little girl that just did, she was young and she designed the
That,
game,
that
you
that's
know?
pretty amazing because there's a lot of financial stuff in that.
I thought it was a guy, maybe because of
Yeah.
Hasbro and, all of, what is it? Hasbro, the game maker? Those are
Parker
gummy bears.
Parker Brothers, I think. Did
Parker
I think
Brothers. Yeah, you
Parker
got it.
Brothers. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was a guy because they have a annual Monopoly Day or something, and that
Mm.
was the company, the guy from the company name. So I thought he invented it. No, it was a young girl who did it.
Huh.
So I have to look it
You
up.
you
And
come up with some really interesting factoids.
it's only from
I-
driving around. You don't know what you're
yeah.
gonna find. It's like Nancy and I
Yeah.
just start like, let's go there. What does this sign say? Then you jump on your googly, your googly phone, and you Google it up, and you're like, no way, and hope you have phone service, because
Yeah.
sometimes you
Yeah.
don't. But you find the weirdest things out on these. But that's the thing. The Midwest is full of little things, and I think there's something about the really, the big winters that you guys have out here is that you've got to create to keep yourself sane.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, I think that it brews creativity, the Midwest, the winters. Yeah, that's fuel for creative spirit is like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Gives you a lot of time to reflect and to create.
yeah, yeah, your winters are beautiful, but you can they'll have them here. Sorry, I'm
Yeah.
not doing
Yeah.
that again. I say that, but then watch what happens this year. So you never know, but very cool. I'm so glad we could do this. Nancy and I are going to have to finish the byway, but because it does go to all
Sure.
these other communities, but it's kind of like following the Frank Lloyd Wright Trail too, because he has one through Wisconsin, Frank
Ah.
Lloyd Wright in Madison, yeah,
Yes.
right
Yes.
downtown
Well,
Madison, they
that
have a
makes sense.
trail. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think it goes
You,
throughout the state or something, and maybe even cross into Illinois, I think, maybe. I might be wrong.
yeah. He did
Um,
a lot of work in the Chicago suburbs, in Oak
yeah,
Park especially.
so that's a whole other thing. I mean, to me, would you consider architecture art?
Oh,
I do.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I do too. I do too. So everyone, again, Victoria's article is up on blendradioandtv.com, and you can visit her website at victoriachick.com. We look forward to next month. I know there's always something cool to talk about and another artist, so very interesting. And I don't know, I'm curious about his sister now and in that relationship. So we'll have to dig
Yeah.
into that a little bit later. Everyone, Victoria is here every third Saturday. Thank you so much, Victoria. And thank you all for joining us here on BigBlendRadio.com.
Thank you, Lisa. We'll talk to you next month.